Welcome back. Shishir Joshipura joining us, the CEO and MD at Praj Industries, and we're going to talk about the power of resilience amid crisis with him as well this morning as we celebrate our 12th year anniversary. Mr. Joshipura, good morning. Great to have you with us. Let's talk about really the power of resilience, a theme today, and how you've come to see this in light of the recent crisis and really getting through some of the toughest times we've seen.
Thank you, and compliments on your anniversary. 12 years is a very strong period, which actually shows that you guys are also very resilient. So my compliments and best wishes for the next 12. If you look at power of resilience, I think there is no better example than my current company. And if you really look at what takes you through different cycles, and cycles are a very normal part of life. If you really look from the perspective of what keeps you going, what keeps you on the other side of the wave, if I can, and you sort of appear stronger, you appear without any bruises, and you get on to the next journey. So look at Praj. It has taken a 35 plus years of commitment, passion, vision, commitment, a teamwork, a never say die attitude. Even when the external circumstances are not conducive, you believe in what you're doing. I think that's the first key lesson for us that I can draw from my company, is that whatever happens, if you believe in your cause and you believe in yourself, that is the first step to becoming resilient. And I think if you can develop that quality as an organization, that you believe in the vision of your organization, you stay committed to the course, and you don't give up. You just don't give up. You continue on your path. And then one fine day, you will find that you're on the other side of the curve, where there's a pot of gold waiting for you. And that's what makes you resilient and come through a winner. Same thing is true for India and corporate as well. I think the whole world, the whole humanity has seen what's happened in the last 15 months, something absolutely unprecedented in form of pandemic. And we have all seen stories after stories of human stories of resilience, and people on the medical profession, people on the front line, those who volunteered for a call. There are so many people in my organization, and stories are full of them in newspapers. We have heard so many stories of a mother traveling thousands of kilometers on a bicycle to get to her child, a laborer putting everything aside and traversing the country on foot. People on the front line, the medical profession, putting their lives at stake, doctors working non-stop. All of these are clear stories of letting the cause for which you are committed to dictate everything that you do, and do it with the highest form of passion and energy. And that is what resilience is built about. And I think we've seen that at people level, at company level, at organization level, and at country level as well.
Now, the government has brought forward its target of, ethanol blending at 20%. What does this mean for the sector?
Yes, I think what's very important is to understand that eventually we have to decide actions of humanity today to protect the environment and life for our children tomorrow. And one very key step on which there is no longer any debate is the fact that we have to take all actions that reduce the greenhouse gas emission from our activities. We cannot stop the progress of humanity by stopping the activity itself, because that is not, then we are not progressing as a society. But should that progress come at the cost of future? And I think that is where the bigger answer lies. And the government of India has moved very decisively in that direction, because biofuels are a very clear answer, a very definitive answer in helping, amongst many other technologies as well, to address this issue of greenhouse gas emission. So that's number one. Number two, this is very simple mathematics. Why import energy when technology can enable you to do it from a resource which is within your own country, which in many ways becomes a waste? You can look at molasses, you can look at straws, excessive and not fit for human consumption food grain. I mean, the list is long, but the fact is that there are so many resources. God has given us that the nature has gifted our country this as a resource and not crude oil? Should we not use these resources, which can then enable employment generation in the country, keep the wealth in the country, help with the foreign exchange? And on top of all of this, this is greenhouse gas friendly. I think it's very important that we focus on something that builds sustainable future. I think that is why advancing of this program is an absolutely correct step for the country's future.
Mr. Joshipura, thank you so much for joining us on this very special occasion. Wanted to understand, though, how you're looking at the overall debate of food versus fuel, because there is a strong opinion that incentivization of the sugar crop is not a good idea, as it effectively means that we're using far more water to produce energy. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the fact is this, that nature has gifted different resources to different countries, and every country must find a way of best utilization of that resource. I think that's argument number one. Number two, technology has significantly progressed now, both on the agriculture side as well as on the industrial side, to reduce the water footprint dramatically. Just to give you an idea, not too long ago, water requirement for producing 1 liter of ethanol used to be of the order of 10 to 12 liters. Now the technology has made it possible to bring it down to 2.5 liters. So the technology has progressed dramatically. There is a big focus now on recycle, on zero liquid discharge. So I think what we have to see it in the context of how the technology is developing and what can we do with the resources that we have to utilize. Tomorrow, if I say, yes, should I conserve water? By all means. It is a very, very precious resource. But then technology can make it possible for you to achieve those targets. And I don't think we still need sugar, right? So we will have to produce sugar because that's a basic requirement for human food chain. If we have to move to that direction, we are going to produce sugar, then the waste that is left out must be utilized for the next step. And I think one of the key ingredients that we are learning is, for too long, we have been a hydrocarbon-driven economy. And I'm talking globally now. Time has come for us to think of a carbohydrate-driven economy, because that is what nature has gifted us. That is what makes and builds a sustainable future.
So how far away do you think we are from the commercialization of 2G technology for ethanol production? And how does that energy cycle work in the case of 2G in terms of how much more water we're using to produce more energy?
2G is a very interesting technology. As you are aware, we are building 3 projects in India now for the oil marketing companies' projects on the second generation technology, which will be using rice straw as a base feedstock. Today, as you know, rice straw has no other known commercial use, and therefore farmers end up tossing it in the field. And that leads to its own set of problems, especially people living in Delhi experience this every winter. And of course, it does get much more exposed also because it's the national capital. But having said that, I think, and its own associated problems, if you can just treat that resource instead of waste and burning to a resource that can be used and put to good use and converted it to a carbon GHG friendly fuel, all the benefits that we talked earlier just simply flow in. And most important, it improves farmers' income. It reduces pollution both at local and global level, CO2 being global and the other air pollution that we see in terms of smog and other associated problems in the winter months in the belt of north of India. So I think very clearly it's a winning solution that we can take. And this is, I'm giving rice straw as an example. You can actually think in terms of any standing residue waste, residue of the crop. Once the cropping is done, once we have decided to move on, I think it's very important that we start to address this issue. There is also another dimension. As a global citizen, as a responsible country and a leading country in the world, India has got its own commitment to meet based on what we committed in the Paris Accord. There are NDCs that are determined for us. We are required to meet those goals, even though on a voluntary basis, but we are required to meet them. So this is a very correct step in the direction, because this helps us to meet not only make us energy independent and towards independence, but also helps us to meet our GHG reduction goals in a very, very definitive way. So I think instead of treating a national resource as waste, we suddenly start to look at it from a very different perspective with second generation technology, which converts the waste to wealth. The three projects I talked about on commercialization, they are progressing very well, and we expect that when we speak this time next year, we will have commissioned the first commercial project.
So, even though the government has come out with a strong intent when it comes to the CBG front, both with the SATAT scheme but there seems to be still a lot of distance between the cup and the lip. What do you think are the hurdles that need to be ironed out still before we can finally see it being commercialized?
I think what's important for us to understand is that any enabling environment that gets created or ecosystem that gets created around a particular direction of policy is very important, that we have a sustainable ecosystem that gets developed. And I think several steps have to be taken in the direction. The last mile connectivity, for example, irrespective of what we're talking about, the basic hurdles, because when a policy gets formed, there were other rules in the old context which may become hampering and not enabling. So I think we have to look at those things. For example, one of the dimensions we looked at in the field of CBG was the fact that the law must permit you to take the gas and blend it into a CGD network. There was no law that permitted that because there were two different gases and therefore there were two different tax structures. So how do you go about mixing that? So I think somebody had to solve it. So the last mile connectivity issues have to be very, very importantly addressed. And I think that's the attempt right now. But at a broad policy level, I think we have moved very, very decisively over the last 2 years since the National Biofuel Policy was launched. And we are very, very positive about the overall impact on the development of the environment and the ecosystem, which we believe is very, very conducive right now for the progress and growth of biofuels.
Sure. Mr. Joshipura, you're currently working on many other technologies besides ethanol as well. There's CBG, there are bioplastics, lignin-based bitumen as well. If one were to force you to name two technologies which you think are the next best or next in line for commercialization, which would those be? And what would be the timelines for the same for you in terms of commercialization, that is?
Earlier, the most important dimension is that as an economy, several economies in the world for that matter are beginning to look at transiting from being a hydrocarbon economy to becoming a carbohydrate-based economy. And I think this is a very big transition which will in its own wake will bring several steps. So biofuels are one step in that direction. As you mentioned, ethanol, we have already seen what's possible with ethanol. CBG is beginning to get onto the commercial path in India. Very, very ambitious program. Nowhere else in the world such a program exists, with small exception of United States, but there also is pretty restricted on the farm waste and some of the municipal waste, etc. But what's very important for us to understand is that we are definitely shifting in a direction where over a period of time we will see transition from ethanol, which will become a very basic building block. We have seen the whole movement right now, if you look at it, is captured around surface transport, right? A lot of movement on the surface, on the roads. But there are two other very major modes of logistics. One is the marine and the second is the aviation. So these are two areas that will see big strides as we move forward in terms of what happens to the aviation fuels and what happens to the marine fuels. Lignin will have a large role to play when we go to the marine fuels. Aviation fuel, ethanol will have a large role to play to convert it into, and there's the two big changes that we'll see, that the whole chain will shift away from hydrocarbon to carbohydrates. And as we move forward, then from beyond that, of course, there's a lot of talk about and lots of action also happening in the hydrogen space, the blue hydrogen and the gray hydrogen and the green hydrogen. But the key fundamental that will drive all these efforts, end product can be in any form, but what will drive is what is the best possible utilization for the resource that the nature has given us. And I think that's where the technologies will focus.
Okay. How are you managing or mitigating cost inflation? Share a little bit about the strategy there as well.
Well, cost inflation is a very normal phenomena that we have, especially for those of us who have grown up in India, have been accustomed to managing high inflations. What becomes a little bit of a challenge in the short term is if the rise becomes very rapid in a very, very short period of time, as we've seen with the steel prices, for example, just now. So obviously there may be a very short-term impact on the steel price hike on everybody who's a steel user. No question about it. Everybody will be impacted in one way or other, because you cannot have stored the steel for your requirement for going through the year. At the same time, while that happens, I think we also have to find new efficiencies. The technology has to step in to reduce the material content, but improve the efficiencies and the effectiveness and the productivity of the asset. So we'll have to find a good balance. But overall, and then of course, as the project cycle moves, we settle down to a new level of cost that we get accustomed to. But what's more important is to continuously use technology to find newer ways to what I would call as offset the impact of inflationary costs. Because if you can improve performance, as I was mentioning the other time, if you can reduce water footprint from 10, 12 liters to 2.5 liters, you've done and then that has a spiraling effect, because then you pump that much less water, you consume that much less energy, you cool that much less water, there are less chemicals, it becomes a cascading effect. So technology will have to play a very central role in helping us to manage inflation over a medium to long term. In the short term, we'll have to find efficiencies in our own system to manage.
Finally, what's the order funnel looking like? Are inquiries now converting into higher order inflow for 1G in light of the advancement of the blending targets?
Yes, what's happening is that we are clearly seeing a very large increase in number of inquiries. So that's number one. Number two, which to me is even more fundamental, number of inquiries is one indicator, is the whole industry structure on 1G is undergoing change. Till not very long ago, we knew that our customers were almost always the sugar mills, because they had the feedstock of molasses with them. But with the opening of the feedstocks across the chain, not only on the sugar side, but also on the starchy feedstock side, we are now inviting a lot more players to come and set up. Both geographically, it is much more spread compared to 3 states in India earlier, but also the people who are setting up the project are also very different. So you won't believe if I tell you that I'm talking to a steel company, I'm talking to a ESG fund, I'm talking to a solar plant developer, I'm talking to an independent power producer, I'm talking to a very, very large business house which has no connection to what I would call as the commodity that of 1G ethanol. We are talking to FMCG companies because they are looking at greening their fleet. Very different set of players are now coming. So industry structure has undergone a fundamental change in terms of who can put up the plant, what are the economics of the plant, and what the dynamics of the whole game is. Of course, even the financial system has come around to create a whole new kind of support system with banks taking a very different interest. Government's push is very, very visible. So I think we are seeing several elements of the environment aligning themselves in the right direction.